Hey folks, it's Ryan here from Magus Instrumentalis. This week we're going to be specifically looking at the Hydrasynth from Ashun Sound Machines. And we're going to use a Midi CC layout that I created in order to do that. Now I made over 24 of these, and you can download any of them by going to our website, magusinstrumentalis.com, and clicking Resources. The Midi CC layout for this specific patch will be under the blog post, and you can click the link in the description of this video in order to access that. The ASM Hydrasynth is one of my favorite synthesizers of the last several years, and one of the things that's so great about it is it has an extremely flexible routing architecture, and there are a number of modifiers you can use to change your sound. This makes it a really great candidate for use with the Ars Memorium because there are so many things to map the controls to. We're going to start with a patch I wrote called It Follows, named after the 2015 horror film by David Robert Mitchell with a soundtrack by Disaster Piece. I really enjoyed that soundtrack, so when I made this patch, it reminded me of it, and I named it that. So let's give it a quick listen. Now, if I latch this, you can kind of hear what it sounds like. It's essentially a sort of complex evolving pad. I should also note that I've connected the Hydrasynth to my computer with a USB cable rather than a standard DIN MIDI cable. The Hydrasynth is a class-compliant USB MIDI device, so that means it'll show up in the list of outputs from the CV to MIDI object from VCV. When I activate the Ars Memorium, you can immediately hear some of the changes to the sound, and you'll notice that the sound changes pretty dramatically as I move about the XY grid. What's going on in this patch is essentially I've just set up some sounds that I thought were interesting, saved them in the XY grid, and we just have two random voltages slowly modulating the X and Y coordinates. So you're just getting this random walk through this timbre space that's generating the results that you're hearing. We can also modify the interpolation amount by connecting an LFO into the interpolation input. What this does is gives you some level of consistency and repetition in a patch that would otherwise be a bit random and chaotic. If you find all of this a bit confusing, or just find yourself getting lost a bit within the patch, one thing to do is simply go into edit mode and start making changes. By doing this and looking at the Midi CC implementation chart on the right, you'll be able to have a better idea of what you're doing and what effect it will have on the overall sonic result. I personally like to have this all written out in a blank panel to the right so that I can look at it at any point in the patch without having to consult a manual. Now I should probably point out that the Midi CC mapping here is essentially arbitrary. These are things that I thought were interesting. It doesn't mean that this necessarily has to be the mapping that you use. One of the things that happens with this is because I have varying delay times, there are points at which the delay changes the pitch because the rate of the delay is changing over time, and it creates these kind of effects that sound a little wonky. So you may not want that in your patch. You may want something else. You can simply look up the Midi CC list for the Hydrasynth online. I believe it's in the manual, and you can make your own version. Alright, that's all we have for this week. Thank you so much for checking it out, and let us know in the comments if there are any pieces of gear that you've been using the Ars Memorium with, or if there are any pieces of gear that you would like us to make a CC mapping for. Stay safe out there, and we'll be back with more videos soon.